So today we're pulling apart a pretty massive new report. It's called the Algorithmic Horizon.
It's a big one. And we're pairing it with some industry updates to really track this monumental shift happening right now in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, the move away from, I guess, artificial intelligence as a kind of design trick
Yeah.
to computational intelligence as a reality.
And we want to see how that's disrupting, well, everything. How games are made, how they're played, and, how they're governed.
Let's start with that trick then. For the last, 20 years? Game AI wasn't really AI at all.
Not at all. It was a magic trick. If an enemy flanked you in a game, you weren't praising intelligence. You were praising a very, very clever script.
The classic smoke and mirrors. So we're talking about things like finite state machines, behavior trees.
Exactly. It's basically a flowchart. Think about the elites in Halo 2, a benchmark for this stuff. They weren't improvising.
They were just executing a decision tree.
A very well-designed one, but yes. The goal was always predictability.
Yeah.
Designers needed absolute control, because if an enemy actually had free will, it might, just walk off a cliff.
Or just decide not to fight you, which breaks the entire game.
Right. But that level of manual control, it just became economically impossible.
Which brings us to the first big disruption, production. AAA budgets are hitting, $200 million now? The industry is on this content treadmill.
And they just can't keep up. That pressure is what forced the tech to evolve. But for a while, there was this huge technical hurdle with 3D assets.
Soup mesh problem.
Yeah, exactly what it sounds like. You'd ask an AI for a 3D model, and you'd get this chaotic blob of triangles. No structure.
Useless for animation. You can't make a character bend their elbow if the geometry is just a total mess.
It would just collapse.
Hmm.
But the new tools in 2025, things like Rodin and Meshy AI, they finally solved that topology challenge.
They generate quad-based topology.
Which, for anyone who's not a 3D modeler, just means the mesh is made of neat little squares, not messy triangles.
And that matters because it deforms correctly, like how a muscle would.
Precisely. So the whole workflow changes. An artist goes from being a vertex pusher, building everything by hand, to more of a curator.
Okay, so that's the production side. But let's talk about runtime. What happens inside the game while you're actually playing?
This is where the report gets into Neurosymbolic AI, or the context mesh.
And this is the solution to the LLM hallucination problem, right? You can't have an NPC promising you a quest reward that doesn't actually exist in the game's code.
You can't. It would break everything. So the solution is this hybrid system.
I really like the analogy they use, the System 1 versus System 2 thinking.
It fits perfectly. The LLM handles System 1. That's the fast, creative, expressive stuff, the dialogue.
But it's wrapped inside System 2.
The symbolic system. That's the slow, logical lawyer that holds all the hard rules of the game world.
So if a player insults a city guard in a safe zone...
The LLM, the System 1 part, generates this furious, creative retort. But the symbolic system, the lawyer, steps in and says, combat is not allowed here. It blocks the attack action.
So you get the flavor of a real interaction without breaking the game mechanics.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, all this new tech needs guardrails.
Yeah.
The legal landscape has had to catch up very fast.
It really has. And 2026 seems to be the year these rules finally calcified. Steam's policy was crucial.
The one that splits AI into two buckets.
Yes. Efficiency tools versus generative content. It's basically about whether the player sees it.
So if you use AI to help with coding, no disclosure needed. But if it makes an asset, a voice, an image...
You have to disclose it on the store cage. Total transparency.
And on the acting side, we got the SAG-AFTRA 2025 agreement.
A huge deal for performers. It finally drew a clear line between a digital replica, a clone of a specific actor's voice, which needs consent and pay, and a generative voice, which is synthetic.
It created a clear framework. So that leads us to the final piece, the really bleeding edge stuff, Agentic AI.
Yeah, where we move beyond just simulating conversation to simulating actual intent. Project Sid is the big example here.
The Minecraft experiment.
Right. Researchers dropped 1,000 AI agents into a server with no scripts, no goals, no instructions.
And they didn't just wander around.
Not at all. They formed a society, they invented an economy, they established their own laws. They even voted on a religion. It was all emergent behavior.
It's incredible, but it leads to a really strange, provocative thought. If we're building these simulated realities where the agents have their own lives and goals...
It does raise a pretty big question about our role in it, doesn't it?
Right. If the world is that rich and complex without you, will the player eventually become the least interesting part of the game?
Something to think about.
Definitely. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.